hello everyone. First, it's been a very long time since I've seen some of you. Faces I recognize immediately, other that I haven't seen so long I didn't even recognize. No, I don't have anything to share. That would have implied that I actually had prepared something, which unfortunately I just did not have the time to do because I've been insanely busy lately. So, it's very nice of you to give me an hour and some change. At this point in time, don't really know how I will be using that hour, to be honest. But I'll do my best to try to keep things interesting, even if it's not always on calculator. Now, whoever is drinking a beer over there, it's not very fair because I'm trying to be, to slow down on the alcohol and, okay, that's not a beer. Okay, I take it. It's not 5 o'clock here yet, so, I'm trying to be good. Especially with the confinement and all of that, it's been hard on everyone. So, anyhow, now that I've done saying hi to everyone, what can I talk about? Well, obviously, you're here to listen to me talk about calculators. Unfortunately, I do not have a lot to say about calculators. So, and I'm going to try to explain a little bit why, and then try to talk about what might be happening in the future, although a lot of it is well, I mean, especially going on YouTube, there's lots of things I cannot say. Most of what I would be saying would be what I think and not confidential to HP. So, of course, I can't really talk about the future that much. But as lots of you know, there have been some changes on the calculator side at HP. That's public information. Tim, who's working with me, has relocated to Taiwan. I'm still in Europe, and most of the people we are working with are no longer working for HP. They've moved away, they've moved on. Things have been revamped, remodeled, and all of that. Companies like HP are always in turmoil. Things are always changing somewhere and having effects somewhere else. And Calculator have been kind of caught in that because we're small. Calculator is a small thing in a very, very, very large company who does not handle things in small ways. So, I had that discussion with someone a couple of days ago complaining about some big company laying off 10% of their workforce and saying, oh, look at this bad big company. They're just not thinking about people. And I have to try to explain to them how it works. I'll just move away a little bit. Hopla. I'm sorry, I have no clue how long ago it cut off. Can you give me an idea?
Yeah, you were saying 20.
Yeah, 20 years ago when I joined HP. That's where it was. I need to remember what I said. I don't know. I think I was trying to explain how a large company works and what happened to Tim and I. And the gist of it is large company like HP grow continuously by accretion, buying other company, merging other company, continuously hiring. And then they just do regular cleanup by getting rid of 5%, 10% of employee and just reorganizing things, big turmoils. And Calculator in some ways was caught into that, and Tim and I were told to go do something else. And we said, what about Calculator? And they said, what's Calculator? And we said, well, that's what we've been working on for the last 20 years. And they hear, oh, we do calculators? Yes, we do. And basically we were told, okay, well, you're going to continue working on calculator on one side and do that other thing, which is important to us on the other side. So what's been happening is we've been doing both. We've been trying to continue calculators and at the same time working on these other projects. And these other projects have all to do with PC accessories. PC accessories, that's your mice, your headset, like the one I was using that's not working, obviously, keyboards, all these things that attach to your PC. And over the last year, as you know, there's been that little virus thingy going around, and the net result is everybody's been working from home, or lots of people, and we've been incredibly busy. Companies like Dell did not go well with the epidemic. And if you look at it, it's kind of funny. They did not go well with the epidemic because everybody wanted computer at the time. And their model, which is kind of a just-in-time, we manufacture when you order, we make the things as you need them, was why Dell was so hard to fight for HP, because they had very low inventory, very low cost. They came up with business models which were great for them, worked very well, meant that they were kicking our rear ends. But the epidemic arrived and they just could not, their supply chain was broken because of the epidemic and people couldn't order from them. Well, HP, we still have the old, mom and pop business model where we manufacture, we sell to, continent-wide distributor who will sell to region-wide distributor who will sell to country-wide distributor who will sell to, the local stores, which means that we've got insane level of inventory. It costs us a huge time, huge amount of money to manage it. Inventory stuff you've built and haven't sold yet, so it costs money. It's locked capital. It also means when some new devices come along, well, you basically have to scrap the old one because nobody wanted to buy them. But when the epidemic arrived and Dell and the other couldn't produce, we had all the inventory on hand and we sold it and we sold through and we made tons of money. But that also means that everybody wanted a mouse for that new laptop or a keyboard to work from home. And since that is what Tim and I are working on, well, we got very, very, very busy dealing with that. Which means that last year, where we wanted to spend some time on calculator, well, we have not been able to spend a lot of time on calculator, unfortunately. So that's the gist of what's happening on our side. We are still working on it. You've seen some of the beta coming around, and we would really like to continue working on putting out some more betas. You've seen apps disappearing from the app stores because, well, they were working. Why touch them? And for some reason, Apple and Google think that if you're not touching an app, it's old, and they remove it. Like, why do you remove something that's old just because it's old if it's working? But no, their principle is it's old. You must change it. Like, why change it just for the sake of changing? So that's roughly what's happening in our life, at least in the corporate life. I don't know really what else to say to talk about that. You've seen the beta coming with Python, so we are working on Python for the Prime. At one point, it will come out, hopefully, whenever we've got time to do it. We'll need some people to test it, so that's when lots of you will be, I hope, joining in and helping us. But that's roughly what's happening to us at this point in time, and we hope 2021 will allow us to do more things and to work on more items, including calculators. So I don't know really what else I have to say on calculators. I mean, after that, I might be able to go in some of the details if you've got specific questions.
Cyrille, I think one of the questions that people are interested in is which models are still in production. Are you able to tell us that? Because we've heard various things about ones coming out of production.
As far as I know, the 12C and 12C Platinum are still in production. Prime is still in production. The 10B2 plus second, whatever it's called now, is still in production. I mean, we keep just adding plus and, you know, and second and stuff like that on product. I usually don't follow that much on that. The 17B2 plus, I believe, is still in production. The 35S, I believe, is still in production. And the rest, you know, was put end of life a long time ago. So if you look at what we have right now, we basically have three types of calculators. We've got Prime, which is the flagship, and we'll keep working on. And there's no reason that I can think of where we would put it out of production. You know, bar some big hardware things like, oh, we don't have microprocessor and nobody wants to spend the time to change it, but I don't see why that would happen. We've got the two which are based on the Atmel ARM chip. So there's the 12C and the 10B2 plus. These ones, you know, if tomorrow Atmel was saying, we don't make the chip anymore, we will need to switch them. That's a big project. I don't have the number on sales. As long as we sell enough of them, I'm sure we'll put the work in to change microprocessor. And the two other, the 35S and the 12C Platinum, are on 8051 type chip. They were made by the ODM at the time, and you know, as long as the chips are made, we'll keep making them, I'm assuming. And these chips, you know, there's no reason why they would stop making them. So unless sales fall drastically on these products, I'm assuming we'll just continue making them and selling them. So that's what, you know, these are mostly my guess on these products. You know, nothing new, nothing that you couldn't figure out by yourself. And I'm saying these things to protect myself. If somebody says, "Yo, you're disclosing confidential HP information," I don't have any more information than you. I know the processors. You know, so do you. I look at them and I look at the market, and these are my deductions. I'm not really talking about any plans specifically that we have at this point in time. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks. And the emulators, I know people have raised concerns about those, and that's purely just an admin and time thing. So it's not that you've discontinued doing them; it's more that they've just, for whatever reason, become unsuitable for Apple and Google, and they've dropped them. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, Apple and Google seem to have policies that if you don't touch an app for a year or a year and a half, and it varies, they'll just delete it. They'll just remove it. Because from their standpoint, if something is not being touched on, it means that it's not alive. I don't think that if I was coming to Apple and say, look, we've got that emulator for that HP12C that we've been making for 35 years, it's not changing. Why would we change the app? And they look at us saying, 35 years, that's not possible. Yeah, well, tough luck. I mean, we've got that product we've been making for 35 years. It's been exactly the same for 35 years. We haven't changed it. Why would we change the emulator? And, you know, they'll probably look at us with big Google eyes, or googly eyes, pun intended, and tell us it's not our process. So, you know, and when you don't touch a chunk of software for 2 years, 3 years, you know, 4 years, and you try to pick it up, you realize that, oh, yeah, but that was with 3 versions ago of the compilers and the tools, so it doesn't translate directly. So you have lots of work to pass it to the new libraries, and then you discover that there's some bug there because the libraries have changed, or you've lost compatibility because the new stuff isn't backward compatible with what was before. And you just go down through the rabbit hole of having to upgrade a bunch of stuff to try to find compatible version, which is just a huge amount of frustration just for the sake of saying, oh, we've changed it for nothing. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Well, you know, they're forcing us to fix it when it's not broken, which means it's going to cause problems. So, you know, all it means is time for us, and time is always hard to get.
Why don't you do what they do, which is resubmit the same product and say, changed in many ways?
Unfortunately, they want you to recompile it for the latest SDKs and the latest OS, and that's where it breaks down. We would like to just do that, but I did try it on one of the apps, and it wouldn't compile. It wouldn't compile because the SDK, you know, 5 SDKs ago or 6 SDKs ago has changed enough that things break. And then you have to readapt your software to the new and good way of doing things that you've been doing for 20 years. And they've decided, oh, no, you know, we've invented a better way to read files. Really? You know, so
it's not like we care, is it, particularly? Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we have to do it with, you know, both Apple and Google, or Android and iOS and Windows. And now there's Windows on ARM coming, and there's Apple on ARM coming. And I can guarantee you, if I was to retake the apps and recompile them today, in 6 months, I'll release them saying, oh, no, now you need ARM compatibility, as, you know, we are removing everything which isn't compatible with all our platforms. If you remember, we had the Prime with 64-bit, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago for Prime. You know, if we did not have a 64-bit version of Prime, they would just remove it on Mac.
You mentioned Python. Python's obviously taking off in education big time, and in lots of software engineering environments. So is that going to be expanded to? Is it just going to be Python syntax within CAS, or is it going to be? Are you looking at full, you know, a micro Python or?
So there is already Python syntax in CAS. You know, it works. It causes as many problems as it solves, but it is already there. You have seen the beta that was published, what, a year ago with MicroPython, which integrates within the numerical side of the calculator. So that's a pure MicroPython. As I said, that's already been published, and it's already out there if you get the right version. So that's what we need to do. That's what we're looking at. The problem is, how do you integrate that with the rest of the system so it makes sense? Some of the competitors, well, pretty much all the competitors have Python as a completely separate side of their system. So you just go into Python and you just do pure Python programming, just in its little silo. I personally think it is not the right thing to do. And I think that Python needs to be able to integrate so that you have a program that can have both Python, non-Python, CAS, and exchange objects in between all of that. But of course, that means extra work, and that's not always easy to do. You know, things don't always like to communicate that well. But yeah, I mean, the demo the demo or the beta that was put out a year and some change ago was based on MicroPython. There's another Python which is tiny Python or something like that, which I really like. it's less than 64 kilobytes. But unfortunately, it's like Python 1.0 syntax, and everybody wants to use Python 2 syntax, which is different, and that wasn't supported. So, MicroPython is the only choice there. But the memory footprint, goes from 60K to 1 megabyte, and 1 megabyte isn't small. The OS or if you look at Prime and if you start looking at the files in the update, you'll notice that roughly the whole system right now with the CAS plus all the graphing engine and the operating system and all the UI is on 7 megabytes. Add 1 megabyte for Python, and it's a significant chunk. Sorry, I'm distracted for a second.
Sorry. I may have missed your MicroPython beta. Where's that available from?
It was a release, a device release that was done a year and a half ago. Eric probably has a copy lying somewhere on hpcalc. So,
oh, is it? Okay, it's just me missed it then. Sorry.
Yeah,
It was accidentally released in one of the betas.
Ah, right.
But since it's been released, accidentally or not, it makes it, it means that it's public and that I can talk about it.
Do you want, shall we open to questions from, well, anybody? Do you want to ask a question?
Oh, yeah. And I can talk, you know me, I can talk about anything.
Well, while people are thinking of one, I would be interested. Can you? I've not been to the HHCs, and I'm afraid I haven't caught up with all of the videos. But could you explain what happens in the Prime in PPL when you do a check? Does it actually compile the code? And then does it run an image? Is it bytecode? What's going on? Can you explain that for us?
Oh, it does compile. Well, it's not a compilation per se, because it doesn't generate ARM assembly. But basically, it looks at the code, it tokenizes it, and it's gonna generate a tree, an execution tree. With objects, a tree of objects, and there is 16 type of objects. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to open some source code here, and I can't. I've switched away from the WebEx view, so I can't see you. But I'm just opening a Visual Studio. Because I can probably share or show a little bit of code here and there.
We used to call that semi-compiled.
Yeah, you can call it. I mean, if you think about the HP48, that's basically what it does. I mean, it's going to generate some tokenized structure that it can then execute. In the case of the 48, you could have embedded assembler and you have the whole system with the headers and stuff like that. But looking Prime Core, here it is. Source files, and I'm gonna want parser. Where is my file? MNOP parsers. What is it? Oh, here it is. And I'm gonna just want to, come on. Okay. I want that file, and I want mostly Control-O, parser.h, and I'm gonna want also prime function 2h. Okay, so let me see if I can do some screen sharing once I'm in the right location. HPObj, where is my THPObj C program? Okay. Back to WebEx. Come on, partager, share, écran 1, partager. Okay, is that working?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Okay.
We've got a black screen at the minute.
Tell me why it's not black.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Source code.
See all the code in its glory.
Yeah, some code in all its glory. So there's three main files that I'm working on, which are the parser.h, parser.cpp, and the prime function, 2 include. And this structure here, that hpobj, is really, it's one object. It's one object, and the object can be of different types: a real, an integer, a string, a complex, a matrix, an error, a list, an identifier, a function, which is the one of interest, one of interest here, a unit object, a sequence of instruction, a user function, and the other one are a little bit less interesting. And a gen. Gen is the CAS type for a CAS object. So really what happened is I'm going to be generating, when you check, I'm going to be generating an instruction sequence. An instruction sequence will have user functions in them. And a user function, as you can read here, will have a name, parameter, a sequence of instruction associated with it. And in the sequence of instruction, you're going to be really finding this first type of object here, either non-executable object, I call this one, or a function, which is really a call to a function. So if you have a program called A, which contains two functions, which I'm going to call B and C, which have parameter, and B does something like, parameter 1 plus parameter 2, what you're going to have is an instruction sequence, which is going to contain one user function called B, which is going to contain one instruction sequence, which is going to contain something like a plus function with a parameter, which is going to be also a user function with just the name, with the name of the variable, and a second parameter, which is going to be the name of the second parameter. And then there is a chunk of the program which is going to be dedicated to executing all that. Now, there's one trick. Actually, there's a couple of tricks there. First, it's non-recursive. So I can manage memory. Therefore, if you do something like an infinite recursive system, it's not going to crash, or it's not supposed to crash at least. And it should handle that properly. So that's a classic when you implement an evaluator of some type. It's very, very, very easy to do it in a recursive way, but you end up with problem with stack. So you need to do it in a non-recursive way, basically handling your parameter stack yourself. It's much harder to do, but it's much better. That's, of course, how I did it. I mean, it's something that we've known for a very, very long time in computer sciences. Anybody who's worked with Lisp is very familiar with the concept. Nothing new there, but I had to go through the pain of doing it. So that's the first little trick. The second little trick, actually, is there's two tricks there. One has to do with Lisp processing. So functions, in function definition, it's going to explain in the definition of the function whether it is Lisp processing aware or not. And if it is Lisp processing aware, if the function itself is not Lisp processing aware, then the evaluator, if one of the parameters are list or is a list, it will automatically break it down and do the list, call the function multiple times with the sub-arguments of the list. If it's, one list argument and one not list argument, it's going to distribute it. If it's two list arguments, it's going to check that it's got the right number and match them one-to-one, etc. So all that's in the evaluator and not in the function itself, which is great because if I create a new function, I don't have to make it list aware. It immediately can do that. So that's something which is a nice little thing. The last trick is that a function can return something to be evaluated in a non-recursive way. Because the question is, how do you evaluate something like a for loop? You know, for loop is definitely something that will need to evaluate something in a repetitive manner before finishing. While a function, while it's being processed, can return with an evaluation request, and that thing will be evaluated. So it's going to exit the function evaluation, execute that evaluation, and return to the function, the original function, to continue processing. And that is how I'm handling a non-recursive evaluator. So, you know, the whole parser, the whole evaluator is in these two files. If we look at the parser file, you know, it's just 5,000 lines. And that big file here contains all the user functions. And that's the one which is slightly bigger at 13,000 lines of code. You know, these are fun files to work on or to work with when you're trying to do something. And it's starting to get really big and really hard to get your head around. So did that answer your questions there? Oh, no. Yeah. So the original question is what happened when you press check? Well, when you press check, it's going to take your source code. The first thing it's going to do, because in the 39G plus it was still very buggy, is going to save that to Flash and flush the cache. So first thing, it takes your text and it saves it. Second, it's going to parse it, so it's going to create that HPObj structure out of your text. Third thing is it's going to look in your program at application and program global variables. And anyone which doesn't exist anymore but existed before, it's going to remove them. Then it's going to execute all the assignments in your program, trying to preserve stuff that you've done, but trying to overwrite new stuff. And that was kind of tricky to wrap my head around what needs to be preserved, what needs to not be preserved, especially with app. And that is why we've got program global variables and app variable, which allows to handle that type of situation. And, you know, it's, of course, during the parsing phase, it tries to find errors. And if it finds errors, it's going to show you where they are, or at least give you the line number so you can correct them. There's, of course, you know, things like dealing with things defined in advance. There's all the problem of locality of variables. It's going to try to make sure that you don't use a variable which is not defined. So it's going to have to go through the whole system. If you use a variable, it's going to try to figure out whether it exists or not, whether it exists in your current program, in another program that is accessible, in another app, maybe in an app which is the currently running one, maybe in another app. You've got all the definition stages. So, you know, is it app dot something or program dot something or not? Did you fully qualify your name? So that's a very critical and important and hard part to implement, so that you don't end up having runtime errors. You know, as much as possible, I'm trying to avoid runtime error. That is a very big flow of interpreted languages, and I'm trying to block them as much as possible. So I hope that that ended up by answering the question through presentation of how it works on Eris behind the scenes.
Yeah, so in terms of the performance, then you've not generated ARM assembly language or ARM machine code to execute.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's raw performance that's still interpreting.
Yes.
The object tree. Yeah.
Correct. And even with that, we are significantly faster than the other calculators.
That's astonishingly quick if that's the case, because we were debating this in one of our meetings recently, thinking that you must actually compile the code in order to get that level of performance.
So I've thought about it at some time, but I ended up deciding against it. I just did not feel that I was good enough to be able to do that with minimal to no risk of crashing the system or compromising the system. Remember, we've got the exam mode, which is really, really critical in a lot of countries. And it's as much as I wanted to give direct ARM assembly access the way we have on the 49, for example, where I went through the trouble of first putting the entry points to do it and then modifying the Saturn assembler so that it could also assemble ARM code. Here, we just could not take the risk of compromising the exam mode. And that is why ARM assembly is blocked. It's that simple. And coding a virtual machine or coding a just-in-time compiler, I'm good, but it's a huge amount of work, and I didn't feel it was necessary. Now, I've been thinking at some point, especially for things like graphics, to try to have some type of minimal language that could be used for rendering frames of a game. That would be much less powerful than PPL, but that would have much higher speed through things like assembly, direct assembly. But I've never had the opportunity to spend the time to do it, especially, the public of user would have been relatively small.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably me, isn't it? Just going back to what you said about variables and the ones that were defined already, the global, the app variables, that sort of thing. I've observed an issue with building an app that used the built-in graphing. So I can't remember now which one it was, but anyway. But the syntax of the program, it fails if you download it onto a calculator that has not just run. Is it the two variable statistics? I think maybe it was something like that. Yeah. Does that, so is that purely because the objects have not been initialized and you have to run through that before the program can use them then?
And that's what it boils down to at the end of the day. If I don't know the exact case here. That's the code that does it right here, and it gives you the order here of how it looks for things. Right. And yes, if the variables do not exist in the system, then it will not find them at compile time, and it will not allow you to access them. Now, if you're using something, one of the issues, for example, F1, if you take F1, you'll notice you can access it from anywhere. It's an app variable. So normally, if the app is not the current one, you should not be able to access it. And I was arguing that it should be the case. Technically, it should be the case. But it would have made the life of a lot of people who don't understand that and who are not trying to be proper, math teacher in lots of cases, hard. They would not have gotten it. I don't know how it is in every country, but in France, programming is going to be taught by math teacher. And I did have a chat with one of the higher up and couple of math teachers about that, and they were saying, oh, there's no problem, we know as math teacher, we know how to be rigorous. And I about burst laughing. Math teachers think they are rigorous. I mean, math people think that they are rigorous, but compared with the software engineer, they're babies. And I'm saying that, I like math teacher and I do like math, but when you do math, you're interfacing with a human, and the human is able to take context is able to know the context and take that in context, actually. The best example is the equal sign, which is used in math to mean different things, while in computer programming, it's not. You've got different symbol to mean the 3 or 4 things that equal can be or can do. And, that rigor makes it hard sometimes when you implement software, because you do have that internal rigor to your program, because that's the nature of the thing. And then you have to deal with people who are not as rigorous and who do not understand why they have to do function.f1, why they can't just use f1. And so I had to put in place things that I did not like in my program and in my system to handle that. It's the reality of, theory versus, let's be practical. And in the case of most math, math use, it's perfectly okay. They do not need to be as rigorous as we do in programming. And it's not a problem until we have to work together. And then, practicality versus the way we work sometimes clash. But anyway, you've got the list here. I don't know if you were able to read it. I know I've published documents that explain that. But, here's the code that actually does it, at least part of it, and how it works.
Thank you. We have a question from Ramon de la Rosa Steins in Spain on YouTube. He's asked, and I suppose it's possibly related in a way, but it's related to CAS. He's asking, is it feasible to have an option to disable in the CAS predefined variables from something? For example, names like VI, B, and theta can be useful for symbolic manipulation. Do you understand what he's asking there?
I'm not sure exactly. And as you know, the CAS is basically, we get the CAS wholesale from Bernard. And we don't have a lot of choice on how to do that. We get his CAS, we put it in, there's some minor changes or some minor adjustment, but that's basically it. So not very easy unless it becomes important for Bernard to have this type of functionality for his CAS as a general rule. Then I don't think we can count on something like that. It's very unlikely that it would happen or be done.
Sure. So, Ramon, you lobby. Sorry, lost you.
Bernard,
yeah. Sorry. Having a complete blank. I'm reading too many things at the same time. Sorry. Thank you.
All of you are, call Bernard and ask him or send him an email saying, "Oh, we really want this or that." Maybe he will have it.
Yeah. Does anybody else have some questions? I know on the email the other night we had a great big list, but
I have a question. One of the most common errors or problems that new users to the Prime seem to have, and it seems to be almost universal, is not understanding that I'm not sure the right terminology, but let's call it a system variable or a built-in variable, and they'll start using them. I wondered if a simple way to help people avoid that is if in the calculator display, all system-owned variables were displayed in a different color, so that if they're using them, it would be reinforcing that this is, even though they thought that they created X, it really isn't. It's one that's there, and it would just simply be reinforced by the presentation in a color or some different thing like that.
Yeah, what you're talking about is syntax highlighting. That's a great feature. That is definitely something that, you know, we've been asked multiple times. It's something that we should be working on. It's something which is not that simple for a slew of reasons, and that takes a lot of time. One of the rare, all the data entry, the text entry, it's all the equation writer. And the equation writer is one of the rare things which Bernard or Jeff Tupper, who's done all the graphic, or the mathematical graphic drawing, has done. And one of the rare things which has not been done by one of the four of us is the equation writer. It was done at the beginning of the 39G Plus project, or at least the middle of the 39G Plus project, or Prime, I think, I'm not sure, by a guy called Gérard Squelar. Some of you might remember him. I knew him before I started working for HP. He actually made an equation writer for the 48 at the time. He's the one who made the equation writer that ended up in the meta kernel, which is the program that was made by Jean-Yves Avenard, Gérald, Etienne de Fora, and myself. That's the program that got us hired by HP to start working, you know, and then we did the 49, etc. So a second version of the equation writer ended up there. When the calculator division was disbanded in Australia, Gérald and Jean-Yves started their own company, and they work for TI, among other people. TI? No, Casio? Don't remember. One or the other. And, you know, lo and behold, Gérald made the equation writer on one of these devices. And when Prime came along, you know, Gérald was once again hired to do what he does best, which is the equation writer for Prime. But, you know, that was years ago, and syntax highlighting means going and modifying the equation writer. And it's, I think, 28,000 lines of code, and it's a lot of work to try to understand that. So one day we'll be able to get onto it and spend the time and do it. Don't know when. But definitely, you know, I hear your pain there. I understand. To do it, as I say, you have to have syntax highlighting. And once you have syntax highlighting, you know, the capabilities to actually display it, you need to real-time path everything to try to figure out what is what. That is not easy either. And will take a significant amount of horsepower and therefore battery power.
Thanks.
Do we have some more questions? I'm sure people must be. I think the other ones, I think we've covered, haven't we? About, I think Bob was asking about which calculators have been discontinued, but I think Cyril's answered that one already.
By default, yes, or by removal of the other ones, yeah.
Yeah. Eddie,
Cyril didn't mention at all the cheapies, like the 300S Plus. Oh, you did mention the 10S Plus.
No, I did not mention the 10S. I mentioned the 10B2.
All right.
The cheapies, honestly, these have always been handled 100% by marketing, and I am not partially following them. I do not believe we are making any of them at this point in time. I might be wrong. Don't take my answer for my word for it there. As far as I know, we are not making them anymore, but I might be completely wrong. We might still be making them and selling them, but it doesn't go through my hand in any way, shape, or form. So
it doesn't bother you. would it bother you to try to make a 40th anniversary 12C instead?
Yes.
It would make a lot of trouble for you.
No. I
It would be wonderful.
I definitely, I mean, it's not every day you have a product that you can say, oh, it's a 40th anniversary.
It is.
I think marketing should work on that. It's not an R&D issue, it's a marketing issue.
Okay, you don't have to recertify a product because it's just a different name on the case. Oh, so that will be fairly easy. Well, I suggest it to you.
I'll make sure to pass it on to marketing. I know I did warn them to, a year ago or something that I do not know if they've done anything.
Well, that's some good news. That means that there is a marketing department.
Yep.
Good.
As far as the cheapies are concerned, Vlodek can corner the market with the HPCC 4.9 G plus.
It's going to be a G2.
Oh, G2.
In memory of the Prime G2.
G2 plus special second edition.
Yeah. With 4 functions, only one of which, 5 functions, only one of which works in reverse Polish, and that's the square root key, isn't it, Vlodek?
That's the one, yes. Yeah.
Don't forget negative. One of my favorite of the chips is the quick calc. I was able to snatch 30 of them at some point, and I just had them everywhere around the house, on the fridge, in the shop. Quick calc is a great little calc.
Got a beautiful display.
Yes. So and it works. I mean, when I go in the shop and it's -5 degrees, it still works, which is great too.
And you were saying shop just then, when you were about to say in the shop, I thought you were going to say in the shot.
No.
Not quite the same.
Well, I probably could have some there too, but
yeah, for those not in the know, shot is a French slang word for the toilets.
The privy.
I have a question. Did you take your telescope out to take photographs of the conjunction?
So on the day of the conjunction, the weather was crap and I could not see it, so I was kind of miffed. I was lucky enough, I was able to see it the next day. It was a little bit less tight, but I looked at it at 300 zoom. Of course, since it was really low on the atmosphere, it wasn't great, but it's great. I mean, I could see the bands on Jupiter at the same time as the rings on Saturn. Couldn't see the Cassini division, but I was fairly happy. So those of you who don't know, I've taken on amateur astronomy over the last 5 years or so. Build myself a little observatory, build myself a telescope, or 5 or 10, or I don't know how many I've built so far, but probably 15 or 20. The last one I've built, actually, I'm going to share it. If I can share a picture, or can I just share? How does it work? Partager. Hop. Okay, partager. And I'm going to put it on. And I know the contrast is very good on that picture. So that's my daughter next to that telescope. So that's unfortunately not my telescope. A friend of mine asked me to build it. It's a 600 millimeter telescope.
Wow.
It's big. It's 50 kilograms, 55 kilograms. It's a huge telescope. There are not a lot of 60 centimeter, 2 feet telescope lying around. And, I just built that one. I delivered it to the guy a little bit before the conjunction. These are my own design. I have fun making them. I made a video about the making of that one, actually. So, that's one of the things I'm working on at this point in time, it's of course, me being me, I focus on different type of telescope, at least unusual. One of my nicest one would be this one, and I don't know which one are the nice pictures. So that's a telescope also. So as I say, I focus on things which are unusual when I make telescopes, just for the sake of it, I guess. That's an old wood structure, and you've got the mirror here and the ball at the end. But yeah, so I was able to see the conjunction, not on the day off, unfortunately, but still, still was able to see it. I don't take pictures when I do photography. People who take pictures in astronomy are a whole different slew of people. It's a different ways to do astronomy, and it's very, very computer intensive. And I spend my days in front of my computer. It's not to spend my hobby in front of a computer. So, I do visual only, and mostly telescope making astronomy. So, one of the things I'm supposed to be working on actually is this one. What is it? CCSD. Where is my file?
Do you grind the mirrors yourself?
What?
Do you grind the mirrors yourself, or do you buy those?
So I have parabolized a mirror that I purchased, which was which was spherical, and I probably got lambda 3, sorry. And I did completely grind a 250 millimeter mirror, and it's just about at lambda 4. So it's not, I am not yet an expert in any way, shape, or form when it comes to grinding mirrors. But I've tried. I spent some time on it. I probably will do some more at one point in time. But it's a very intensive activity, and I haven't spent much time on it. Is my screen being shared or no here?
We're waiting for the content to appear.
I think it's coming up.
Okay.
Oh. I think it's perhaps a bit slow as it uploads the pictures. No, we've just got black screen. Oh, here we go.
So this is a Foucault test of one of the mirror I've been working on. That's a 250. As you can see, I had a problem. So what we're looking at here, tell me when you see the picture.
Yeah, we've got it, the green one. Yeah.
Okay, the green one. So for those who don't know, and I'm going to try to explain that here, the round bit is the mirror. And we are trying to see here, to test it with, little material that you can find in a garage. We are trying to make it accurate to within 50 nanometers, roughly 60 nanometers from edge to edge. So we've got 25 centimeters from edge to edge, and we need an accuracy in the range of 60 nanometers. So most of you are scientific, you can understand the difficulty of things here. And this is done by interferometry, basically. And I shine a light on the mirror, and I try to bring a knife edge from the side. And here you can see the dark area and the light area that tells you which part of the mirror are deeper or higher. And that does give you that accuracy of around 50 nanometers through interferometry. So it's really, really interesting. It's a really interesting activity. It's really crazy to think that in your garage with basic tools, you can grind a mirror with that type of accuracy. And the mirror has to be at least needs to have an accuracy at least better than 1/8 of the wavelengths of light for things to work well. That's where the difficulty lies, and why telescope mirrors are so expensive. One thing I'm trying to do for the local astronomy club, this is a telescope I made for my daughter 5 or 6 years ago. As you can see, it's just a PVC tube, basically leftover from the restroom, les chiottes, comme on disait tout à l'heure, of the house building. And my idea is to make kits of this telescope to have a telescope building activity with kids at the astronomy club. So we could organize, for less than $100, you go, you spend the day, and during the day, you build your own telescope as a kid. You learn how it works, you learn how to tune it, and in the evening, you learn how to use it. So I'm working right now on plans to automate that, and how to handle prepping the material for 20 of these things. Working with CNC machine, making the focuser part. You've got some example here of the work. I've got a little CNC machine to do that type of thing, and all the plans and all that to do it in a massive way. Let's put it that way. So here's the answer. Yes, I have grown my own mirrors, but I'm not yet good at it. And I've built my telescope and I observe.
Good. We have some questions. Dan, do you want to? I think you should be able to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask your question about the apps.
Yeah, sure. Going back to the very beginning when you were talking about the emulator apps, I understand the challenge because Android, I assume, and Apple certainly basically leaves apps behind if you don't keep up with the changes that they make to their interfaces. Is there any practicality at all to having HP, if they're going to orphan those apps anyway, open source them so that people who might be interested in keeping them updated with the operating system could do so?
That is an avenue that could be looked at. One of the issue is not all the code within them is HP. As I was saying, I mean, there's obviously the CAS, but luckily enough, the CAS is GPL, so that helps things a lot, somewhat. But we also have some open source things in it. I'm thinking like the JPEG encoder decoder, the PNG encoder decoder, or the zip. And do the license match? Can we use one with the other? These are technical legal questions that are problematic. Some of the code also belongs to Jeff Topper. I'm thinking about the interval engine, which is used for the advanced grapher. So the advanced grapher uses Jeff Topper's interval engine, and that is licensed by HP. So what happens if we try to put everything in public domain? How do we handle this type of thing? There are some legal issues there that will need to be looked at. Definitely, I'm a big believer personally in open, not in, well, I'm going to be careful. I'm going to say in source available systems. Open source has a level of, the word open source means some type of advocacy and some type of forcing certain viewpoints, as is very well known with GPL. And from my standpoint, as long as people can't take your work and make money out of it, I'm okay. But that's not really the GPL point of view, who has a tendency to try to want to force people to become open source. That I have more problem with. And I don't know how HP would think about it. But definitely, I mean, if that could be open source or made source available, and we could get some help from the community to maintain these things, less work for me. And definitely, it's a model that has been used by companies in the past. I mean, lots of companies work with open source stuff. Google, has a bunch of things open source. Anybody working with Linux, even large companies, are definitely having some type of collaboration with developers which are not their own. So it shouldn't be an issue in the corporate world anymore. But you still have to go through all the, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and it's a lot of work also. So if we could get there, great. If we don't, then we don't.
I hear you. It's not any direction you go is going to involve work and devotion of time. And the open source landscape is not just a uniform utopia. That boundary between free and non-free software has always been a rough spot in it.
Yes. Exactly. So I don't know. It's something we would need to look at. I have no clue what HP corporate and/or marketing and/or other stakeholder in HP would react to such an idea. As I say, personally, I've been in HP for a long time. I know perfectly well that companies like HP have a short memory of things they've done in the past. I mean, it's normal. We make things and we put them out and then we move on and then it gets forgotten. I know that if that source code does not make it to the public, when Tim or I leave the company, it's just gonna be forgotten and nobody will know where it is. I know it is the case because when I joined HP 20 years ago, the first thing we needed was a source code for the HP48, and we tried to find it, and we couldn't within HP. Everything was backed up somewhere. Go figure where. We could not find it. Turned out that one of the ex-HP employees had a copy, which they were not supposed to have. And by then, because the core division got disbanded, that person got hired by some competitor of us and was nice enough to give us back a copy of our own source code. I mean, our, meaning HP source code, because it's very, very hard in large companies. I mean, even if the backup exists, if you don't know where the backup is, you can't find it. And I know at one point I was looking for some documentation, and I was told, oh, yeah, by, an ex-HP employee, it might be Jim Donnelly, actually, or somebody else from that group, say, oh, I know, that was on the Scooby-Doo server. I'm here, okay, well, let me look for that. And I tried to contact people in IT. I'm here, okay, well, I need a backup of something which was a Scooby-Doo server. And the guy started doing some search and said, well, I found 58 servers called Scooby-Doo in that time frame. You can't find the stuff there. It's not findable, even if it's backed up. So I know if it's out there and if you guys have access to it, it's more likely to not be lost. And honestly, a lot of it is hours and hours and hours of my work. So personally, I think it would be a good idea. After that, I'm not the one who takes the decision. HP is, and it's whatever is in HP's best interest is what is gonna end up being done.
Thanks, Cyrille. Stefan, do you? Let me see if I can get you off mute. You might be able to get you off mute. You want to ask your question?
Yes. Now I guess I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Cyrille, I'm a great fan of the iPad, and I'm almost always using my iPad instead of my computer, normal computer. And I was wondering some point in time if it's possible to connect physically with a cable the Prime and the iPad. Well, technically it's possible to be able to take screenshots, at least for a first use case, to take screenshots from the Prime. I did a little bit of research, but actually I wasn't very successful to do that, to write such an app. And I was wondering if HP has any plans to do something like that, to support or to write some kind of connection kit for the iPad. But from what I heard today, I guess you're not going any further with apps, right?
No. I'm not saying we are not going any further with app. I'm saying we need to, recompile them, put them back on the store because they're disappearing. The links should be there to allow a virtual HP Prime to talk to a real HP Prime, which means that doing a screenshot will probably be feasible, at least through a little bit of user RPL program. Just on the first calculator. Actually, if you take a screenshot on on your physical calculator, it's what, on P, I think. It gets saved in G9. Don't remember. I think it gets saved in G9, and then you can send G9 as a variable to the virtual calculator on your iPad, and then you can re-display it and do a copy and paste or something like that. But I don't think we've turned on the USB link on iOS. So really what we will need to do is, on Prime, there is an interface layer or a communication octopus at the bottom of the communication layer, which will try to connect through TCP/IP, which is what is used on the iPad. It will try to connect through USB, and it will try to connect also to a local pipe, such as a name pipe on Windows for local, computer to computer, same computer communication, which is used by the connectivity kit. That code is relatively OS agnostic. And it's supposed to work on every OS, but some of the stuff is turned on and off on various OS whenever it's needed or not needed. And I'm pretty sure it's turned off on iOS. At least the USB part is turned off on iOS. And now really what we will need to do is turn it back on. And then it might just work with some luck. I mean, it's always great when you think, oh yeah, and then you just turn something on and your code just works and you're here. Wow, damn. But it might be that case. Will I spend the time to do it? I don't know. Definitely next time I put my finger in that part of the of it, I'll if it comes back to mind, I'll have at least a look to see if I can do it. But I won't guarantee anything.
Okay. Thanks. So maybe just a suggestion for the future.
Working every day, you do lots of very dull things when you work. I mean, you've all had successful careers and all that, so you know that some of the work is great and exciting, and some of it is dull and just boring. And sometimes it's nice to interject a little bit of craziness or interesting things to do if you've got the time to do it. And sometimes you don't really have the time, but you need it for your brain to be able to take a little vacation, and that definitely fits the bill of that type of thing. So as I say, next time I put my finger in that part of the thing, and if I still remember it, I most likely will at least spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes to see if it's even possible.
Super. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Stuart.
Oh, was that me you were talking to?
I saw a message. Somebody saying he was made redundant.
Yeah, that was me. I was having a quick laugh at the successful careers thing.
So, well, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay. I wasn't doing it for sympathy. I was doing it more for the comedic value than anything else.
Oh, it still hurts.
Yeah, well, onwards and upwards.
Felix, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, very brief one. I repeat this every 2 or 3 years. When I do a calculation with the prime,
I am not going to extend the triangle solver.
No, the triangle solver, I'm not interested. Now, the unit system.
Yes.
Any progress there sort of in the future? Because when I use the prime, I often juggle with units, and I would really appreciate conversions and handling of units in the way sort of like the 50 did.
I understand. Well, the 50, you're more talking about the 48, I'm assuming, or the 50 if you turn the graphic menu off. We have never really found a good way to do it besides going back to something very similar to the 50, which is sad. I really like the 50, the original 48S, I guess. I agree with you. The 48S with the menu like that and the 3 shifts, the unshifted and 2 shifted possibilities was tremendously powerful and quick. And I know Tim has spent a lot of time on trying to find a way to shoehorn something similar on Prime, but we really have not been able to find a UI that fits in Prime that allows us to do that correctly. It's a tough nut to crack. So definitely that's one of the pain points and one thing we'd like to work on, but we still haven't really found a good solution.
If you look at Mathematic or something, they haven't found a good way to handle units either. So it is difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
So we come back with a question to 2 years or so.
No problem.
Thanks, Felix. There's a question on...
Maybe in 2 years, that thing is going to be open source and you can do it.
I need to be retired by then. Yes, that's...
There's a question on YouTube. Turge, is it Turge? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Valestada asks, using the prime in RPN mode, will there be a way to return results from functions or programs without having to press enter? I'm struggling to try and visualize that one, but are you any good on that one, Cyrille?
I think so. So the RPN mode on Prime was really, as is very visible, added as an afterthought. RPN works really, really, really well on the 50G or the 49G because it matches the underlying system and everything. So it really is a shoe-in because it's just an exposition to the user of what's underneath. It's absolutely not the case in Prime, which obviously, I mean, it's PPL behind. Everything is PPL. And PPL does not really work well with RPN. Among other things, the variable argument count on functions. And really trying to shoehorn RPN or RPL or RPN plus, if you want to call it that way, in Prime, it's never going to feel natural. And it cannot feel natural because it just is not, it doesn't match what's below. So can we make it better? Yeah. Will it feel the way it does on the 49, 50? No, it will never. So it's always going to be a disappointment to traditional RPN users. And I'm sorry about that. It's just it's the nature of the fact that it's always going to be an overlay on top of something which is not RPM.
Thank you. Steve, was it Steve? Steve. I can't find Steve to unmute you. Hopefully you can unmute yourself. You want to ask?
This is Steve Tucker. Can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yeah, good.
Apologise, I'm not on video. I'm on a phone at the moment. There's not enough power to run that. But yeah, my question was regarding the possibility of a socket on the Prime to run third-party code that might have incompatible licenses, so it can't be incorporated perhaps into the main OS. There was something on the forum about Fourier transform, where the author might make the code available, but I believe NumWorks do something similar to allow people to compile their own code, and it's sandboxed away from the main code. Is there any thoughts on that, Cyrille?
Oh, it's not sandbox on NumWorks. It's not correctly sandbox, and it goes down to what I was saying earlier about exam mode. Running extra code, it causes problem with allowing people to, giving people access to the rest of the system, and it means that they can potentially break the exam mode, which is a no-no on our side.
Sure, understood.
So that's the main thing. I mean, I know you can do some type of memory protection and things like that. And as we've seen on Intel Windows, even with the power that these big companies have, they're still not doing it right. And it still can be attacked and still gets attacked. And as I say, exam mode, sacrosanct, can't touch. After that, it would be a lot of work, because every single function, everything needs to be, an SDK needs to be created with all the data structure which are spread around, tens of thousands of lines of code, 100,000 lines of code or something like that. Plus all the functions that you want need to be made accessible through some type of system code. And they all need to be cleaned up and verified to make sure there's no bug in them that can be exploited. Another problem is we work a lot through callbacks. So callback means you give me a pointer to some of your code and I call you back later. Of course, that just breaks all securities everywhere. So that will need to be completely reworked too. So it just does not mesh well with security, and that's what's breaking it. We would love to have that type of things. Among other things, to be able to have infinite precision floats in Prime, but the infinite precision float libraries are all under licenses that blocks us from embedding it in Prime. Hence why Prime does not have infinite precision floats. In the same way that the infinite precision integer library that we use, it's MP, I don't remember the name, TomMath, sorry, is what we use, is relatively old and not optimized and relatively slow, but that's the one we can use because that one is fully open source, is source available, do as you want type thing, while the other ones we would like to use have licenses that blocks us from using them in Prime. Because of, none of these, most of these open source licenses have been made for computers, never thinking about the embedded world. And in the embedded world, everything is compiled, linked it's linked at compile time to make a single executable, and you don't have dynamic loading and things like that.
Right, thanks, Cyrille. That's a good comprehensive answer. I guess I can see all the difficulties. I guess this is something that Swiss Micro's also faced, and they came up with a solution of having to separate all the different license codes. to meet the demands of those?
Yeah, as I said, the last nail in the coffin for us is the absolute protection of the exam mode.
Sure.
That's something that Swiss Micro does not have to deal with.
Thanks, Cyrille.
Thanks, Cyrille. Just following up on that, and the protection of exam mode, would it be possible to have function to allow program input output over the serial, maybe just console type level, because in exam mode you're not going to have students that are connected there in an exam. You're not going to have them plugging things in, so that surely wouldn't compromise that, would it? So can we have input output, please?
So the calculator, so on Prime G1, no. Because the operating system, which is Besta, is not in our hand and is limited to USB slave and USB host with another prime, and that's it. It cannot support any other type of HID or VID PIDs, basically. On Prime G2, which is fully and 100% under our control, yes, definitely we can do. We could do this type of things. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you take a USB hub and plug it on Prime, and then plug a Prime in that USB hub to connect to your Prime, it will work. At this point in time, the code isn't great and can only connect with one device at a time, one HID device at a time. But definitely, there's much more flexibility there, and you could imagine some type of PPL function that allows you to query the USB system to know if you're connected to something else. And if you're connected to something else, the packet know the USB packet size and send and receive. Now, that would only work if it's a HID device, if it's a vendor-defined HID device. I guess it could work with mice and stuff like that. So only with HID devices, and you should be able to do send and receive of USB packets. So we could think about some ways to add a couple of PPL functions that would do that.
Yeah, that would be quite cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But your issue there is that you're making it G2 specific, I suppose.
It would be G2 specific, yes.
Yeah.
I just do not have the control on the operating system I need in G1 to do so.
Sure, so, absolutely.
The function would probably still exist on G1 just to make sure that programs still compile, but they would be inactive.
Yeah. If you could add that while you're tinkering with the code, adding units and screen dumping, then that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would give you access to screen dumps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think. Does anybody else? I think I've done all the questions that I've found on the chat. Does anybody else have one? You should all be able to unmute yourself one at a time.
I had one final comment. I spoke to Richard Nelson on the phone last night. He said to say hello to Cyrille and everyone else. He also asked, as Cyrille properly anticipated, if the triangle solver has been extended in any way.
No.
I'm happy to tell him no.
That whole triangle solver has been done fully for one purpose, is to get one single person to just shut up. And once the triangle solver was there, that person just kept asking for more. So
this is a teacher.
The triangle solver, and there is actually a note in the source code saying, this is there solely because it was asked by Richard Nelson. But I mean, I love Richard. He's a great guy. And the triangle solver is something I use a lot in the shop. It's a great little app. It's really useful. So I mean, but you know, if I can make fun of Richard through it, I'm not gonna stop myself from doing so.
How's Tim doing?
He's doing okay. He's happy in Taiwan, so.
And Bob, you want, was it Bob? I think wants every surveying program implemented on the Prime as well, don't you, Bob? Was that right?
Yeah, just built in. I'll do that after a couple of hours before bedtime. So.
I think Bob was it Bob complaining vigorously about he never wants to see another surveying program?
It was Bob saying he doesn't ever want to see another surveying program ever again. However, that's the lifeblood of many of the products that we have at this stage, so we can't really complain about them too much.
I know. So, guys, I'm going to have to get going because I need to go, and I'm supposed to bring a kid back to his parents and get my kid back from wherever that he is or she is. So I wish you all a very good rest of the day and lots of fun, and hopefully I'll be able to join you another time on one of these conferences.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cyril. It was great to have you. You're bang on time as well, so we're going to have a break now till 5 o'clock our time, local time in the